I mean, it's spiritual for me.
Yes.
It's my vocation. I can't imagine doing anything else as a professional but working in service of young people. Because my success cannot be an exception. My success has to be the expectation for all little Alicias, for all little Kevins and all little Jasons, like that. That's the way, and for all the Bronx, let's be clear, right?
Live from the Bronx, we are the podcast and creative brand that celebrates creatives and change makers, and I'm your boy KB.
What up, y'all? It's your boy Jay, and I'm so excited to be back in the studio.
So we are at the lovely Sankofa House, the premier location in the South Bronx. If you don't know, now you know. Definitely check it out. Look at all the natural lighting, melanin popping. And today, we have a super duper special episode. Our guest for today is Alicia Guevara. She is the CEO of Big Brother, Big Sister New York, the first female identifying CEO. And she has raised millions of dollars at various nonprofit organizations. She's mentored a ton of people, had a bunch of different roles, which we're going to get into. But the one thing that she wants y'all to know is she is Big Bronx energy. Throw your X's up, please.
Yeah.
We can get a big round of applause for Alicia in the building.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. This is great. Your girl, Alicia.
I like that. Yo, we
That's
can
right.
have a third chair for you whenever you want. I like that
Here
intro.
for it. Here for it.
Yeah, and we're just excited to engage in this conversation. And before we dive deep into all the amazing things that you're doing and have done, et cetera, we love to just learn a little bit about our guest. So you mentioned you're from the BX, Big Bronx
BX.
Energy. Tell us a little bit about your journey and your upbringing, and just take us on a journey.
Yeah, the Bronx streets raised me. I'm from a couple of different places in the Bronx, and it's funny because when people tell me they're from the Bronx, I'm like, okay, really? But for real?
Yeah.
I'm gonna test that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
test it. But I grew up on Marion Avenue between 188th and Fordham Road, so Fordham all day.
Okay.
But also spent a little bit of time in Kingsbridge, like Kingsbridge and Morris. I'm gonna like pinpoint it, and Sheridan and like Mount Eden around there. And I'm still in the Bronx. I'm in Riverdale, and yes, it is the Bronx.
Still
My
counts.
zip code is
Still
104.
counts.
Add in the numbers, so I'm still
Yeah.
from the Bronx. But look, I grew up in a really tight-knit household with my brother and my mom. My grandparents were around us all the time. I grew up in a household where people believed in me, believed in my potential, encouraged it, pushed me to do anything that was possible. I really had the opportunity to envision the kind of world that I wanted for myself. And it wasn't just in my home, but my surrounding community also wrapped their arms around me, because I was that kid, right? I was that kid who wasn't necessarily smarter than everybody else, but people took a chance on me, and they gave me opportunities. They knocked down doors for me. And I think I was the kid that my community was banking on, right? And that became incredibly clear when I went to prep school. I went to prep school on Museum Mile on 5th Avenue. And going there every day and then coming back home to the Bronx was this tremendous dichotomy that I had to navigate at 14, 15, 16. And I really think that it was at that tender age of 14 when I said to myself, okay, there are the haves, like real haves, and have not. Because I thought I was rich. We were hood rich. We were rocking Benetton, and my brother had his Pat Ewings at like 8. So we thought we were hood rich, and then I really saw this difference, and it was in that moment at 14 when I was like, whoa, what am I gonna do about this? And that, in lots of ways, has shaped my life, my career, my choices for how I spend my time, and even how I raise my own kids today.
I love all of that. So I want to go back a little bit to mom.
Yeah,
Mom roots.
yeah.
So you talked a lot about community and how mom put you on a path to believe that there was nothing that you couldn't do. So how did mom do that? What were some of the things she was able to kind of implement?
Yeah. So mom modeled. She modeled behavior. And I don't think she was intending to do it. She was just trying to live her life the way she thought it needed to be lived, which was total and complete investment in her family. I mean, my mom, she loves hard, almost a little too hard.
Yeah.
And she'd drop her kids off, make sure they were well fed, go to work, come back, and it was all about her kids. And she created in our household this safe haven at a time when things weren't, the Bronx was going through it, right? Like these were the 80s. This was the midst of the crack epidemic. I saw my friends being torn apart from their parents. It was, it was almost equivalent to chattel slavery, right? Like people really being torn apart as a child. That coupled with the AIDS pandemic, there was just a lot happening. And there was a way in which my mom created this safe home that not just for us, but for all of our friends. And I think parents in the community started realizing that. So our house was the house you could go to for a cup of milk or for a plate of rice and beans or a cup of sugar. You could be fed, you could be taken care of, and this is some funny stuff. So we lived on the first floor, and we had 6 windows on the first floor with these iron wrought gates. We were not allowed outside because, as much as a safe haven that my mom created, she also understood where we lived.
Yeah.
And she wanted to keep us safe. And so we couldn't go outside. So my brother and I figured out a way to get our heads through these iron wrought gates. And so we would hold court, and our friends who were outside would come to us, like to the windows, and that's how we would hang. And when my mom realized that, she's like, hold up, they can come inside, right? So they did. So it was very common to see, girls in my household baking cupcakes, or the boys being driven to a basketball game or a baseball game, and that's how we rolled.
You're bringing up something that I think is really dope that we don't often hear about as a narrative in the Bronx, and that is community, right? In the same way, we know there's a dope community in the Bronx, and how our neighborhoods come together and the families come together and support one another in all the ways that you mentioned. A lot of other people who aren't in the Bronx don't know that and don't hear about that.
Yep.
So I just want to uplift that really quickly because it reminds me of my upbringing too, just in my neighborhood. Even the OGs on the block, they knew I was going to school. They were like, Jay, you better keep your ass in school.
Yes.
I don't want to see you out here,
Yes.
right? And it was just like a whole community effort to make sure that folks were doing what they had to do. If they saw you was doing the right thing, they wanted to support that, right? And neighbors would kind of see what's going on. If you're coming in and out of your house, who's coming in and out of your house? They telling moms, right? And so now moms know what's going on. So everyone kind of knew that folks, we all knew each other, and parents knew each other, and it was the same thing. They take you in. I used to go to my boy's crib across the street, and grandma would cook. She's making sure I'm eating. They come to my crib. Mom's is making sure everybody's eating.
Everybody's eating.
So yeah, I wanted to uplift that. And so that said, leading me to this next question is like, how do you build that community now, personally, for your children and your children? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question because you're right. Like the community that you just talked about, the community that raised me was very much a physical community, right? Yeah. There was no social media. Yeah. We didn't have smartphones, but you better believe that word still traveled fast. And quickly. Yeah. And it didn't matter who you were or what your station was in the community. We were all part of each other, right? Like I lived on a block in a building that was subsidized housing across the street from homeowners.
Yep.
And my neighbors the kids were incredible entrepreneurs who had corner empires.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. And that was never the thing that got in the way. That was never the thing that created a rift between us. On the contrary, there was this, Alicia, make sure you're like, I'm proud of you. You're doing your thing. My grandparents could not carry bags upstairs. Yeah. They couldn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My grandmother had arthritis. It was pretty severe. They could not see her with bags in her hand because they'd be like, no, mommy, come here. And they'd grab her bags, take it all. It didn't matter who it was. So that's the community that I grew up in. When I think about my children, it's a little different, right? But it was really important to me that I raised them in a community where they were seen, where they were acknowledged. And we do live in, a building community where you have to ride the elevator and you meet people. And for my kids, it's really important to me that they be fully self-expressed, that they not feel anyway about talking to an adult, so long as it's respectfully.
Yep.
That they're able to express whatever they're feeling, whether it's fear or excitement or joy. So it is very often that my son, in the mornings on the elevator, before people have had their coffee, my 6-year-old boy will look at someone and say, "Are you going to have a good day today? Because I want you to have a good day today." And he gets people talking, right?
Yeah.
But I think that starts in the home. I think it starts with ensuring that youth feel seen, validated, and appreciated, and that we now have the responsibility to create this community beyond the physical. So one other thing that I'll say, because this one's really important to me, and it started really young with my kids. They're only 9 and 6 to begin with, but it started at the earliest stages where I wanted to make sure that they had a sense of consciousness around what they had and what others may not.
Yeah.
And so every season, we gather our toys, we gather our books, we gather our clothes, and it's going to the children. And one time we were talking, who are the children? Well, the children, if you ask them now, are children who don't have what we have, but it's our responsibility to feed into the community. And look, also, identity is big. So by the time I talk about Museum Mile, but by the time I got to Museum Mile, and I was 14, I was the most Bronx, I was the most Latina, I was the most Black, I was the most everything because I wore my identity on my sleeve. And that's very much a part of my children's upbringing. They are very clear and very proud and very centered around their identity at a tender age. So
Can we jump into this identity?
yes, let's go there.
That's where I was
Let's
gonna
go.
go too.
Let's go.
Let's go. So at 14, you said you were very grounded in your multiple identities, right? Being Bronx, being Latina. How at 14 were you so grounded and centered and able to have that sense of self? And the reason why, so I'm a youth developer, I'm a school counselor, and it's something that I always look to foster in some of my young people. How did you have that at 14 already?
Yeah. I'm going to add to that. I'm going to add to your question.
Please. Yeah.
How
You want
did
a job here? You can have the third seat
Y'all
whenever you
hiring?
want.
I'm here for it. How were you so centered against a backdrop of people who look so different from you? Whose access and means were radically different from yours? I'm going to go back to my family and my roots. Growing up as a Cuban kid in the Bronx, there weren't a lot of Cuban families at all in the Bronx. And if you're here, I know who you are. We're family. And I think my family made it a priority that I understand my heritage, that I understand my African heritage, not my African heritage, that I understand my indigenous heritage, that I understand my heritage as a Cuban American. It's almost like I can't be American until I'm Cuban first. Okay. And I think that was certainly a grounding force, a grounding source. I think the other thing was this belief in my potential, right? Like, I see what you're doing over here, but here's where I'm going. And I'm on a mission, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let your situation, even if it's radically different than mine in my current state, be a distraction, because I got things to do. And I don't have the luxury to fall back, because I see how hard my family's working, and I see what their investment is. This isn't something that I need to take, that I can take for granted. I didn't have that luxury. Yeah.
As you're speaking about this, and I'm really thinking about, shout out to your mom.
Yeah.
I'm really
She's
thinking
dope.
how challenging it must have been, because a lot of times when you hear like immigrant stories, you hear this story about like you have to try to assimilate, right? So instead of like identifying with your culture and who you came from, try to be more American, try to be more.
Yeah.
So your mom's perspective, why was it so important for you to know that you were a Cuban American first?
So look, I can't speak for her, but I think generally the Cuban experience was someday we're going back, right?
Okay.
I mean, when you think about the politics of the Cuban experience and this sort of severed ties with the U.S., certainly at the time that my family came, they couldn't have anticipated that, right? So my grandparents arrived in the late 50s thinking that, they came here for the American way. And then in 60, when the political climate changed in Cuba and Castro came into power, my uncle was just 15 years old and couldn't come here or didn't want to, actually, because he wanted to be part of the revolution. He wanted to be down.
Yeah.
And so my grandparents were like, okay, cool, he's going through a phase. They didn't see him again for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So there was always this mindset that it is important for our children's children to understand our culture, to understand our norms, because we may be going back someday. I think that quickly faded, certainly in my generation, and probably my mom's too. But there was always this sort of push for preservation. Like that's what it was about, is this push around preservation, preserve who you are.
Yeah, you're bringing up something that I think is really important for, I think, the Latina culture, Latino, Hispanic, whatever word you want to use. And it's about knowing your history and where you come from. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because I don't think, or at least I haven't in my upbringing, I haven't had a chance to sit down and learn about, like, I'm Puerto Rican and Salvadorian, right? Like in my upbringing, no one was telling me about Salvadorian history or Puerto Rican history to that extent. Also grew up in foster care, right? So like, I didn't have I couldn't like track my family to my, you know what I'm saying? Right. It just, so I would learn from my mom, my biological mom, right? She to this day still tells me stories, and I started to have to do my own research. And that really didn't start for me as deeply as I know it now until college. I pursued social work. And I was learning about words like Latino, why people say Latino versus Hispanic, or where that word even came from, right? And how we were categorized and all of these things. So I was like, this is really interesting. And that pushed me to start learning about my culture and where I come from. And talk about indigenous and African history across Latin America, right? Like, but a lot of us didn't have an opportunity to learn it. Like at least my generation, we're learning that on our own, or we learn bits and pieces from our family, from our parents. But even our parents, sometimes their history was taken away from them, even in their home countries. So I think it's so important for you to just do that exploration. Well, no matter who you are, like just generally, but definitely for our folks who come from Latin America too, right? Just understand, because a lot of times we try to disassociate with certain people or certain ethnic groups, or if you look a certain way, we're like, yo, you're problematic. Meanwhile, y'all might have some similar ancestry in there, right?
I'm sure you do.
So I think, I just wanted to uplift that. I think it's an important conversation to have, and I think a charge that I would put out to folks generally, just learn about your history and where you come from.
Can I go there for a second? Because I really appreciated you lifting that up. So, back to this idea of growing up in a Cuban household where preservation mattered, I was fortunate enough that I was able to talk history with my grandfather, right? My abuelito, shout out to him. May he rest in peace. And so he talked to me about like this war and that war. And my dad was also really fascinated by history, and we had a chance to talk there. But to your point, it wasn't until I got to college that I was like, I'm going to make some choices. So I went to Columbia. Shout out to New York City, Columbia. So I went to Columbia and I double majored. I majored in political science because I wanted to understand my American context. And my other major was history with a focus on Latin America. And even further with a focus on Afrocentricity in Latin America, because it was critically important for me to understand where I came from. And I think it was that consciousness and intention around wanting to not just carry the stories that were being passed down, but to really study them from an analytical and scholarly perspective that fed into my identity. So I am part of the generation that fought, I think, hard to be called Latina and not Hispanic, right? I think of myself as being a product of the four corners. I'm African, I'm European, I'm indigenous, I'm Asian. My great-great-grandfather was Chinese. He was Cantonese. And even today, I am absolutely part of the Latine community in the spirit of inclusivity for my brothers and sisters and my non-binary siblings. But that really was the moment for me. It was college where I was like, I'm gonna engage in a scholarly way to reinforce my identity. And speaking of identity, I'm going to be a little controversial here because I understand where it comes from and I respect it, but I have a really tough time. I don't identify as BIPOC. I identify as a person of color.
Yeah.
I don't identify as Afro-Latina because I don't feel a need to explain my identity. And I think that Afro-Latinidad is really an intention to explain, okay, I'm that kind of Latina or that kind of Black. I'm Black and I'm Latina, period.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think about what you're sharing now. And for me, I think people, the beauty in identity is you identify how you want to identify.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think that's the beautiful thing
Absolutely.
about it. And I also think about where are our inroads to learning about our history too, because I think the beautiful thing in your story is that your parents and your family, your grandparents, they were able to tell you some history and then you went and learned more, right?
Yeah.
But some of us don't even have that inroads in America. If you're like, right, and you're not learning it in school, they're not gonna tell you about.
No.
Right. The other thing that's really interesting as you learn about history is the relationship America has with many of the Latin American countries, right? And when you learn about that, it opens up a whole nother world that you want to look into, and
a whole
and
other
so I
world.
think obviously there's some intentionality about why we don't learn about our history in American K through 12 education. Oftentimes,
It's not a coincidence or a
it's
mistake.
not a coincidence. Yeah,
It's done on purpose.
And so again, it's a reason why you should want to question what you're learning. The other thing I want to share really quickly, and I'll turn it over to you, Kev, as you were talking about identity, is one of the things that I always remembered growing up, and I mentioned I grew up in foster care. So part of my life, I was in Westchester County, in Ossining, actually, where Kevin lives now, and then I came back to the Bronx and lived the rest of my life here, right? So I think I spent like 7 years in Ossining in my childhood, and the rest of my life was here. And I always remembered, especially being in the education space, so many people say, like, obviously I'm like fair-skinned Latino, right? But so many people in the Black community say, nah, you Black. Like, understand your history, like, understand. But I never really thought anything about it, right? I was just like, or, whatever. And at a young age, I would hear it.
Thank you.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Right? Like, sure. But I never really understood what they were referring to or like what they meant. And that even working in education, I heard it even more, even as a professional. And it was like, I don't know what you think, but you Black, right? And I'm like, okay, right? But that made me want to learn, like, what is the history of African and indigenous folks, particularly in El Salvador and particularly in Puerto Rico, in which both lived, right? Well, enslaved, right? Both were enslaved across Latin America. And so what did that mean for me? And I think it was such an interesting thing to think about, because now, take it a step further, the instruments we use, the dances that we do, right? Like the art form, like all of those things go back to Africa.
Yep.
And there's a through line there, and you think about how they get done. Well, how did they get done? Right? So you start thinking about all of these things. You're like, wow, there's some deep ties and connections here, and I need to learn about this, right? Because it is a part of my history. So I just wanted to also touch on that. Kevin, it looks like you want to share something.
A bunch of things. There's so much that's coming out of this. The one thing for me that I that really made me think of is just this oral history. So being able to, folks listening, if you still have parents and grandparents who are present, that's an oral history right there. There's so much information.
Yes.
Sit down and talk. I've lost all of my grandparents at this point, but I'm lucky enough to say I've had my maternal grandparents till my adulthood, and my grandfather. So we're West Indian. So we are from the islands of St. Martin and Anguilla, and I've learned so much about the traditions and history from sitting down with them and being able to kind of have those conversations. So folks, if you still have your parents and grandparents, I implore you to sit down and talk to them. That matters.
Yes.
So I want to get back to your story.
Yeah.
So, because I want us to get to Big Brother, Big Sister,
Yes,
right?
we've gotta get there.
We have to get there. So after Columbia, what are some of the experiences that you had? I would love to hear about some of mentorship that's been really important in your life, either professional and personal, on your journey.
Yeah, look, I think that most of the personal mentorship that I've received came at the hands of my house, like my mom, really. And in my household, But I've been incredibly fortunate to have professionals pour into me.
Okay.
Some who look like me and some who didn't, right? But all of whom understood that they were making the intention to create space for me at the table, perhaps at a time when I didn't even understand what they were doing, right? I didn't really understand. So fast forward from Colombia, I thought that I was going to be a civil rights attorney who was going to fight for the indigent. And it's been 30 years since I graduated. I'm still on my year break between law school, and college. But the truth is that I really saw law as a means to an end, and have been incredibly fortunate over my career to have had other means to the end. And the end really is creating access, creating opportunity, really working to make sure that social justice prevails, and focusing particularly on young people to do so. And along the way, really went through a journey of professional discovery. I've had an opportunity to work in healthcare reform. I've had an opportunity to work in criminal justice and criminal justice reform, community development. And over the course of these multiple experiences, really landed on my calling, which is to work in service of young people. And it really is a calling. I mean, it's spiritual for me.
Yes.
It's my vocation. I can't imagine doing anything else as a professional but working in service of young people. Because my success cannot be an exception. My success has to be the expectation for all little Alicias, for all little Kevins and all little Jasons, like that. That's the way, and for all the Bronx, let's be clear, right? And so I always say we don't do this alone. None of us does this alone. I don't sit here alone. We don't walk alone. And I think of a couple of different people who've invested in me. In my education, I think about Mrs. Kohler. Here I was at this, private prep school for girls on the Upper East Side. And she held a standard for me that I needed to live into, right? It was like tough love.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, you're in my AP class and you don't think you can read? You can walk out if you want, because this is a college course. And so, and I was like, well, damn.
Shout out to Miss Kohler.
Damn, Miss Kohler. But it was also Miss Kohler who encouraged me to join the mock trials team, who believed in me when I became president of the mock trials team, who upon my receipt of my acceptance to Columbia, was the first one who told me about it. And when I was in tears, she said, what are you crying about? You earned this, right? So shout out to Ms. Kohler. And I think about people like the former Assemblyman, the Honorable Keith Wright, who for many years was a legislator in our New York State Assembly. And I was Keith's intern and then worked with him immediately after graduating from Columbia. And, Keith has an incredibly big personality, the former assemblyman. And so he would walk into the assembly chambers with me and say, this is Alicia Guevara. She speaks 5 languages, graduated from Columbia, Ivy League degree. And he had this whole intro lined up for me. I wouldn't have been in there and seen and recognized for that small second had it not been because he leveraged his station to be able to introduce me in that space, right? And look, I think generally over my career, especially in the most formative years, I was just glad that somebody made room at the table, saw my potential, allowed me to have a seat and have a voice. That's what I do at Big Brothers Big Sisters of New York City. Every single day.
Can I ask you a question? You're describing it, but can you define mentorship?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people may have had adults or people in their life that have influenced them in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't always mean mentorship.
No.
So how would you define mentorship for someone who may not know or has a different definition?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that mentorship is malleable, right? Mentorship can be adaptable. It can show up in different spaces and in different places. But mentorship is grounded in a relationship, right? And in a relationship where both parties are committed to pouring into one another. Our young people at Big Brothers Big Sisters, our littles, gain tremendously from being engaged with a mentor who may be able to see what they can't see yet because they just don't have enough. They don't have enough of a runway to see it. But similarly, Countless are the times when mentors tell me that they get as much from their mentee as they give. In fact, sometimes more. And so when you think about mentorship, it is not one-sided. There is really a leveling that happens. It is grounded in a relationship. It's grounded in a commitment to invest in one another. Mentorship isn't about writing what's wrong or saving or teaching you the way that it's supposed to be. Mentoring is about listening to what this person that you're in a relationship with is aiming to achieve and supporting them in the little steps and in the big steps along the way.
Now, I was going to jump into Big Brother, Big Sister.
Yes, let's do it.
So let's talk about the org. Let's talk
Yeah.
about how, one of the things that's really, I'm really curious about how it works. How does the matching work?
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there ever like a cultural or a racial component as you're thinking about
Yes.
matching? The reason why this is important to me is because when I was in high school, I was in a mentoring program and I had a mentor at NBC. I thought I wanted to do TV. I thought a totally
Yeah,
different life.
yeah.
Thought I wanted to do TV, so they gave me a mentor at NBC, and it was a white dude from the Midwest. He was excellent at his job. He took me to SNL studios and all of those things. But outside of the career piece, what I wanted to do, we didn't really have anything to ever talk about. And he was really helpful. And it was not a knock on him or anything like that. But it just makes me think, is that something that's kind of factored in? So
It's all factored in.
Okay.
It's all factored in at Big Brothers Big Sisters. So
Yeah.
just a little bit of history. We have Big Brothers Big Sisters is 120 years old this year. 120
Okay.
years, and our mission is to build relationships that ignite the potential of young people, relationships between young people and caring, compassionate adult mentors who together help this young person to realize their social, their academic, their emotional development fully. And you know, the movement is now a national movement. There are over 200 affiliates across the country, but it started right here in New York City. We are the first,
were the first.
affiliate. We are the first.
right.
You know how New
get
York
it.
does. We're the first at everything we do. Come on. Come on. And so we serve about 2,500 young people today across the 5 boroughs of New
Okay.
York City. And here's how we do it, right? We have several programs. The first is our community-based program. A big and a little, a mentor and a mentee, are matched, and they use New York City as their backdrop to explore all of the ways that this young person wants to continue to grow. They meet twice a month, so every other week, typically on a Saturday or a Sunday for 4 hours. We also have a workplace mentoring program where we partner with over about 60 corporations across New York City, and we bring high school students to these corporations, again, twice a month, to be mentored by the employees of the corporation. Now they're talking about communicating, exploring post-secondary options. What does college and career look like? Our success rates are so incredibly high. 98% of our littles will move to the next grade after enrolling in our program. Hold up, 100% graduate high school.
did y'all hear that?
100%. And what we're learning is that 100% that are graduating high school, about 94% are going off to college. But for the most part, they're first gen, right?
Okay.
So that 70% of first gen don't have anyone in their immediate family that has been to college before. I know that experience. I'm first gen, right?
Yep.
And so recognizing this, we built what we call the College and Career Success Program. And it's intended to support the transition from high school to college, persistence for those, now we're tracking 5 years, and then towards the end of your college experience, access to a mentor in your career choice, in your career space, right? So a mentor will work virtually with one of our scholars for about a semester on a real issue. That young person's gaining transferable skills, and that mentor is interviewing you, kinda, for a semester. So now we're feeding talent pipelines into the workplace, but for our young people, they're graduating with access to an internship and access to a job. So how does this all happen? Back to your original question, right? We lead with child safety in everything that we do, right? We have 5 values, the first of which is put youth first, and that is our North Star. We don't compromise in any way. And so there is an extensive process just to understand who our families and our youth are and who our mentors are, so that when we match them together, it's matched based on interest.
Okay.
It may be matched based on shared language. We've actually done away with gender-based matching. So no longer our littles and bigs match solely on the basis of their gender, but maybe it's language access, career interests, et cetera. And that match is supported by clinically trained staff on my team, right? When we hit 2020, which for the world, I think, and especially in New York, was such a seminal year, and our country had to reckon with its just blighted legacy of racism. It was our bigs who said to us, look, some of us are not of the same racial identity as our young people. We need your help because we need to be able to have meaningful, supportive conversations, and we're not prepared to do so. And so we launched anti-bias training and race-based conversational training for our bigs. Today, you cannot mentor unless you've completed our anti-bias training.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah.
I want to go back to another thing that you said as I think about college students, right? Because you said you support them.
We do.
You support them through college. And I was having an interesting conversation with somebody, and I don't even remember who, but we were talking about how if you haven't had a mentor, right, as you're thinking about career, you might not know how to even do things like negotiate for salary. And once you come out, let's say you come out making $20,000, $30,000 less than you should, you're not ever going to catch up.
No.
So is that something that is kind of covered in some of the mentoring that happens?
100%.
Okay.
So that's exactly what happens and why it's so important to have a career mentor towards the end of your college journey.
Yes.
Someone who understands your industry and can help you negotiate and review that first contract that you get, that first offer, your first lease to an apartment, right?
Oh, wow.
I mean, what am I supposed to do with this? What is 1 month's, like, what is this, right?
Yeah.
And to that point, I think oftentimes we think about mentoring as a solution because we're connecting young people to an adult, but it is equally important to support that young person in understanding the role of the mentee. Okay. Right? Like, too often, I think generally we say, well, let's connect this young person with an adult. But it's also important for that young person to understand how to be in relationship with their mentor, what questions to ask. Again, during the pandemic, what we learned was that some of our mentees, I'm talking about the young ones, like 10, 11, were reaching out to the mentors to see how they were doing.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like, that's what I'm talking about when I say Big Brothers Big Sisters is invested in relationship building and bringing together good people, right? Can we go back to the Bronx for a second?
I was going there next, but take us.
No.
Take us there. I wanted to hear about the Bronx campaign.
Yes, Be Bronx Be Big. So look, it's no surprise. I hope by now y'all understand like how much I rep, feel, am my borough. I am my borough. I am New York, but I am Bronx. And one of my observations was that currently, of the 2,500 young people we serve, only 21% are Bronx residents. Only 21% of our kids are Bronx residents. And wish we could do more, but we need more mentors who are Bronx-based.
Yes.
And in fact, of the 21% who are in our program, the majority of the littles in our program, the majorities of their bigs don't live in the borough.
Yeah.
And I reject the notion that the Bronx does not have qualified, loving, caring, compassionate adults ready and willing to invest in young people.
Facts.
And so with all of this in mind, Big Brothers Big Sisters this past fall launched the Be Bronx Be Big campaign. It is a recruitment campaign intended to find adult mentors who are ready to pour into our young people and who are ready to receive the gifts that our young people have to offer. So 21 years old, Bronx resident, twice a month, you connect with your young person because it's important for our young people to see the very assets of their community. That's what this is about. We're on our way to making 60 matches, and we need more mentors. We need more Bronxites to sign up, to
How
take
do folks
a stand.
get involved?
Come to our website at bigsnyc.org. It is all there. We walk you through it.
Okay.
And we'll sign you up to be a big.
What are some of the so if and I'm thinking about folks who might not want to do college, who might want to do the trades.
Yeah.
So folks who are in trades, could they be mentors?
Absolutely,
Okay.
right? And in fact, our college focus is really for our older
Yep.
our older scholars is now what we're calling them. But we have young people as young as 7 years old
Okay.
ready to be mentored. Your career choices are your career choices. What we're looking for are people who are into young people, who want to connect with young people, who want to be able to learn from young people, invest in them, see their potential, validate it, acknowledge it. That's the ask.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the thing to highlight too, right? It's something that's mission driven and aligned with what Kevin and I do and why we started the Live from the Bronx work, right? It's like seeing yourself reflected across all these different spaces. And sometimes we underestimate the power of mentorship.
Yes.
Yeah.
We all have mentors, right? Like
Yes. Several.
Yeah, the people that helped me think about how to start an LLC, who literally just had poured into me and given me life advice that I can still call to this day. I'm 32 and I can call. I got like 3-4 mentors I call right now. Like, hey, this is what's going on here. Can you support? Or hey, can you, right? And just the power of mentorship, I think, is big. And especially to your point, seeing someone that looks like you and comes from your same community mentoring you is even that much more bigger. So
Yeah, if you can see it, you can believe it,
Yeah.
right? It's possible.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So you were talking about the big Bronx, Be Big, Be Bronx campaign. With a campaign at large, how do you make something like that happen?
Well, back to this idea of community, we do it with community forces, community influencers, champions in the Bronx who are saying, we're going to take a step forward and support this. I mean, imagine the opportunity to amplify mentorship in the Bronx, right? It's place-based, it's place-centric. And we don't do this alone. We do this by looking to the very community that anchors our borough to say, let's amplify this opportunity for
Gotcha.
all young people and for potential mentors. We need you, and our young people need you.
I love that. We will definitely be sharing the campaign on all of our social media, and we encourage you to do the same. We're gonna tag a bunch of people who will also share.
Thank you so much. We're counting on it. We're counting on you.
So Alicia, thank you so much for your time. But before we let you go, there's a game that we like to play here at Live from the Bronx called Rapid Fire. So folks, if it's your first time listening or watching, Alicia does not know the questions at all, which is what makes it fun. So the way this game is going to work, all right? So Jason has 5 questions for you. Jason is going to read the questions, and you're going to answer with the first word or words that you think of. Do not take too much time. It is meant to be fun.
Okay.
Try your best.
All right.
There's no winning or losing in the game. All right.
I don't lose.
All right. All right. Alicia, are you ready?
Yes.
That was the least confident. That was the least confident thing you said today. Alicia, are you ready?
Yes, let's go.
All right.
Let's
Jason,
go. I was
are
born
you
ready.
ready?
I was born ready. I came ready.
That's
let's
that Big
go.
Bronx energy.
Big Bronx energy.
That's
All right.
right.
All right, Jay.
Okay.
Let's get to it.
What is your favorite restaurant in the Bronx?
Sammy's.
Good answer.
What is the best advice one of your mentors ever gave you?
Just do it.
What is the most impactful book you've read?
The Bluest Eye.
What is one word to describe the Bronx?
Everything. Everything.
Last one. What is your all-time favorite hip-hop album?
All-time favorite hip-hop album.
Or one of the?
Well, it's not Bronx, but Illmatic.
Oh, okay.
Let's go.
Nasir.
Let's go.
That was actually a really good.
Yeah.
You just killed.
Yeah.
You just killed.
See,
rapid
I
fire.
thought you were gonna tell me something else. I thought you were gonna tell me like, what's your favorite rap? Like, what's your favorite Bronx hip hop artist?
Yeah.
Yo, so you know what the
And I was.
I know. I go there. Go there. Go there, Kat. Go there, Kat.
Wrestling. Let's go.
Go there, Kat.
the best to ever do it, unfortunately, did not come from the
Yeah.
Bronx. It's unfortunate, but it's true. The R.I.P. the Notorious B.I.G. from Brooklyn.
borough.
From that borough that we don't name on
borough.
this show.
Yeah,
That borough that we name on this show.
See, and I have a different perspective.
Please.
I think that the Notorious is notorious for a reason, right? Like the Notorious is definitely top 5.
Yeah.
Top 5. And I think that in his company, there are other non-Bronxites.
Yep.
And I think of Rakim.
Oh, Rakim Allah.
You know,
Rakim Allah. He changed the way
Rakim.
everyone raps.
Yeah,
You know,
he
and
did.
I-
But
and
you
I
know what's interesting, right? Like
Rakim.
I was
Okay.
just having this conversation yesterday with one of my boys. We were talking about like the question was, this is a little controversial, right? But the question was about Kanye and whether or not he should like. He
that's a
should
whole
be in
nother
the top
podcast.
10, right?
Yikes.
That's a whole nother
Yikes.
podcast.
That's a series.
But I'm
Yeah,
not.
it's a series.
I'm not about to focus on him. But I'm saying this is what sparked the conversation. So we
Yeah.
started to talk about. Are there can he be in someone's top 10 as an artist, right? And then we started naming artists, like who are these? And the thing that I found interesting once you said Rakim that made me think about is what I said to him was like I have to preference my top 5 and top 10 by like my lifetime,
Right.
Right, 90s and up, right?
Right.
I wasn't around to hear Rakim.
Right.
Like you can go back and like hear his music, learn about him,
No, but
learn
you
about
weren't-
his
you weren't
impact.
there.
But I wasn't there.
No, yeah.
So it's always really interesting for me to when I think about this. And to be honest,
This
when
is why you got to do your homework.
This
But
is why- this is why-
somebody puts you on.
Talk about your history.
yeah,
right?
this is why you definitely have to learn about it. But I'm not like listening to a ton of his music.
didn't
I can
experience it when
acknowledge
it was
and yeah,
dropping.
exactly. I can
Yeah.
acknowledge and say, nah, he definitely changed the flow of hip hop and how people rap today. Like I could see that, acknowledge it, say, I know you had an impact, but I can't talk to you about his music like that. Right. And so that's why I share that. But all that to say, when we're talking about Bronx rappers, I mean, we don't
where you
have
gonna go?
like,
Where
you
you
know,
gonna go?
I think there are very few Bronx rappers that are in the conversation of top 5, top 10, etc.
KRS-One?
So again, when I talk about it in my life,
Oh, right.
lifetime,
I'm like-
I think
I'm like 20
KRS-One.
years older.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think we can say right, even if you say KRS-One,
Jay's like 17. That's why.
KRS-One, Big Pun,
Fat Joe.
right? In someone's hip hop top 10?
No,
but that's
not
what
top
I'm saying.
10.
So that's what I'm
talking
saying.
Generally,
I'm talking like there are dope Bronx rappers, but I'm saying when we think about like
Yeah.
KRS-One,
like
Pun.
it's
Pun definitely.
they're
Pun.
yeah. And then you got to go New York City. You got to go.
then you gotta go-
Nas.
you gotta go
Jay,
Brooklyn, Queens.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
God, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so my lifetime, and
Yeah.
I was 15 when I was like, drop the mic. You shouldn't be holding it, right? Like I was
Yeah.
15 years old, and it was Rakim and it was Big Daddy Kane.
Yeah.
You know, it was like Kane. I cut class to I cut class to Chase Kane one time. Just want to put that out there.
But Big Daddy Kane,
Daddy Kane.
inspired big, inspired like all of
right,
all of
for
these
sure,
people.
for
Yeah,
sure,
so
for sure.
You know, yeah.
we're gonna
So-
clip this out. We're gonna use this for something as well, this hip hop conversation, because this was dope. But we do have to wrap up. So I want to say big shout out to Alicia for coming to kick it with us. Big shout to Big Brother, Big Sister, New York City. And can you throw out your whatever social media you want to, so people can follow you and the campaign, please?
Absolutely. So you can definitely follow Be Bronx Be Big campaign. I would say follow us on our IG, which I don't know right now. So we're gonna.
So
do
the thing
it.
that the magic that Brianna does is she's gonna make it
Yep.
appear. You're gonna you email us and it'll be at
Yep.
the
I
bottom.
say follow our website at bigsnyc.org. Follow our IG at
Perfect.
And can I just say one other little thank you? Thank
you
you,
thanking us?
Jason. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me here. But and whether this gets cut out or not, I don't care, because I'm so incredibly inspired and proud of the two of you. Like, relative to you, I'm an old head and I'm an auntie. I'm not gonna say old head, I'm an auntie. And just your fire, your commitment, your passion for our borough is the most beautiful thing. It really is the most beautiful thing. And so, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Alicia.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening, watching, however you are consuming our media. Actually, Jay, can you throw out our social media for those who don't follow us?
Yes, please go to YouTube and subscribe at Live from the Bronx. That is our channel. That's where you'll find all of our content on YouTube.
from the
Follow us
BX.
on, yes, sir. Follow us on Instagram at Live from the Bronx as well. And check out our website, livefromthebronx.com. Let us know who you want to see on the show, right? Let's have some conversation. We're excited to kickstart the podcast again. So tune in, and we'll be releasing a lot more content and having a lot more amazing conversations similar to the one we just had with Alicia. So check us out.
Most definitely. Another shout out to Sankofa House. Thank you for listening and watching. See y'all next week. Bow.